We made this. Hello everyone and welcome to yet another edition of Pick a Disc. I'm your host Matt Latham. This is the podcast where someone picks a disc for whatever reason they want to, and then we talk about it. The guest for this episode is Paul Savage, who is a comedian from around my way, who's now currently living in London, and this is a episode that's been on the cards for about nearly 2 years. And originally I wanted to record it in person, but since Paul has moved to London, I can't really do that, so we've decided to do it over Zoom and finally get the episode recorded. So before I do that and you hear us talk about the Radiohead album Kid A, where we talk about the songs and stuff, blah 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 and all that same spiel, just remember that you can follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, etc, under the name Pick a Disc. And, you know, if you like us, you can rate us on iTunes or whatever it's called, Apple Podcasts, that's what it's called now, isn't it? It's been called that for a while now. I should really keep up with the times. And, and if you have the Good Pods app, rate, review and share on that as well, because that helps boost me up on the indie charts as well. So, yeah. So I think with all that done, all that's left now is to speak to Paul about Radiohead. I can't think of a better guest than a comedian to come on to the 69th episode of the podcast. So, Paul Savage, my guest, you are the 69th episode. So
that's what I'd want. That's the funny number.
Yeah.
Even though that is the not my favourite number. That's always nice. I'm impressed. 69 is a lot. That's how many years?
Well, I've been doing I'm fortnightly, so this is coming up to nearly 2 3/4, I think. Yeah, so this will be August.
That's incredible. Well done, mate.
Yeah, so with all the jokes out the way, my guest, Mr. Savage, who is, for longer term listeners of the podcast, you're not the first ex-housemate of Mr. Tony Black that I've had on the podcast, so that's
that's impressive. Yeah. The tiny little tendrils of how we know each other.
Yes, but
you've been round to my house for house parties.
Yes,
back when I.
Yes, and even the odd comedy as well. So.
Oh yeah, I forgot that we ran gigs in that house. Yeah, it's good fun.
Yeah, so but we're not here to talk about get nostalgic and talk about the past. We're here to talk about the past, but in terms of an album, and it's an album that you've picked. So, Paul Savage, why don't you tell the lovely listeners that you've picked to talk about today?
I picked Kid A, which is Radiohead's fourth studio album. I'm sure they probably did live ones at certain ones, or bootlegs or whatever. But it's their fourth studio album that they did. It was a very interesting one because it was a real shift in what they were doing, because they started out as like a sort of like almost a little bit like a grunge band with their first album. And then they had two massively successful albums of they had the Bends, which was like incredibly successful, and then the OK Computer, which was like the one that everyone still comes back to. And then Kid A was like a little bit of a departure from them. It is a weird record, and they basically thrown away half their fan base, and another half of the fan base were like, this is an album you really need to invest in. You need to learn, take your time to make this work as an album.
Yeah. So why?
But it's I think it's brilliant.
So why specifically this album did you want to talk about?
Well, it was the first one because when I talk about nostalgia, when I was growing up, I didn't spend a huge amount on albums. All right, actually, I did spend a huge amount on albums because they all cost like £14 as a CD, and you go and you buy your CD, but I didn't have a huge amount of pocket money, and so I go, well, yeah, okay, save up for a couple of weeks, and I bought OK Computer off the back of Karma Police, which is the single off it, and then loved that, wore it to death. I think that is a near perfect album. And then I'd gone back and bought the Bends and Pablo Honey. And then it was like, oh yeah, this is 15 quid's worth of album, and this is a point where beers are a quid a can. So you're like, oh, okay, this is all of your pocket money, and so you're going to spend on this, and it was roughly around my A levels, I think. Yeah, 2000. So it would have been, and I absolutely played it to death. I thought it was such an interesting mix of albums. It was one of those ones that I would put on and listen the entire way through. There's no bits that I skip but it was my introduction to sort of electronic music, ambient soundscape stuff that I really like, and just sort of like weird, discordant, jazzy, almost jazz sort of bits. I'm not a huge fan of jazz, but that sort of thing where it was just like it wasn't like four on the floor electronic music. It was like, it wasn't house music or anything. This was weird stuff, and it wasn't like indie bangers, which is. I mean, the fact that they play Creep in clubs is a weird thing, but that it wasn't, one of those. I don't think there were any sort of like singles that you could play at parties, but it's a great album, and I think that was a big diversion from. And I remember it was sort of the nascent area of bands making a thing on the internet, telling you what it was rather than the NME or because the music press were quite sniffy about it in certain places.
So was it the first album? No, was it okay? So it wasn't the first album of theirs. So did you get into Radiohead before this came out then, or was it okay?
Yeah.
When was it you first got into Radiohead?
So they would have been. It would have been just after OK Computer came out, and there was a fairly big gap between OK Computer and Kid A. I think it was about 4 or 5 years, and I wouldn't have got it immediately because I wasn't that into my music. Although I think it wasn't that far off, because I remember it being advertised on TV, which seems sort of mad now that you would have been like full TV adverts for Radiohead, because they are. I mean, it's a very weird one because they are this sort of like the massively successful outsiders, where they're like, yes, we are sure we will play Glastonbury and headline the Pyramid Stage on a Friday night, but we're really underground and you've not heard of us. They sort of played with that thing of being we're actually really cool and outside the music industry, and it was all that sort of stuff around that time of Blur versus Oasis, and they were falling out of like limousines, getting into fights at the Brits, and they're marrying pop stars, and like they're in the pages of the tabloids. Chris Evans is hanging around with you, and that sort of stuff. And then Radiohead were just like, nah, we're gonna live in a weird place out in, and no one even knew who most of the others were. Everyone knew Tom York because he's got very specific facial thing. He's got a sort of lazy eye, and they used him quite a lot in the music videos and stuff like that because he's got a very specific look to him. And but like no one was going, oh yeah, Johnny Greenwood's amazing, whereas you knew most of the members of Blur and all the members of Oasis, and they're all doing like, Radiohead weren't, if they were playing TFI Friday, they were playing the band bit. They weren't coming on for the interview and being like, we're doing this thing, we're doing a World Cup song or whatever. It was that they were playing the music industry as well as not playing it, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. So for those who are unaware of who Radiohead are a English rock band formed in Abingdon, Oxfordshire in 1985. And I didn't realise they were that old. They're as old as me.
Yeah.
The band consists of Tom York on vocals, guitar, piano, keyboards, brothers Johnny Greenwood on the guitar, keyboards, and other instruments, Colin Greenwood on bass, Ed O'Brien, and Philip Selway. And they've worked with producer Nigel Godrich and cover artist Stanley Donwood since 1994. Radiohead's experimental approach is credited with advancing the sound of alternative rock. So for me, Radiohead are a band that the only way I can kind of describe them is that if you can picture me posting the Alan Partridge gif where he's shrugging, I've never really yeah. So like, I've kind of mentioned something similar with the Arctic Monkeys episode. Episode where sometimes you get people are bored on Twitter and you get threads saying, "Oh, what's one band that you've never really got into?" Or
never clicked. Yep.
Yeah. So Radiohead's probably one of the ones that I've did try, but they've just never been on my radar. Which probably, from what you've described, probably suits Tom York to a T. So he probably he wouldn't really give a shit.
Brilliant. We've alienated somebody else. That's the.
Yeah. Also, I mean, there's a couple of like ideas. I think the song "Paranoid Android" was on a compilation CD that I had when I was in 1995. I can't remember how it goes at all. And the song "Creep," I'm aware of, but until I watched the YouTube video earlier, if you asked me to try and remember how it went, I probably couldn't. Yeah. But then one of the things that I realise that I keep forgetting is a Radiohead song. Is the song? Is it "No Surprises"? Or no? Yeah.
No surprises. Yeah.
Yeah. Which has got that kind of very slow, unique, very kind of like almost synth xylophone sounding style kind of riff through it, which I remember was Radiohead, but I didn't realise it's there. It's usually one of those songs that they always end up playing when England get knocked out of a major tournament. It's like whenever it's either that. I think it got replaced a couple of tournaments ago with really sad covers of Linkin Park. Kind of Radiohead are kind of one of those on the cusp of the consciousness. I think where I think they'll play you'll hear them, but you're probably not aware that they're Radiohead. And it must be the case that Tom York must be able to buy a new story on his house, but all he does, he just climbs to the third floor that he's just built and just scowls at it, saying, "I hate that I can afford you." So,
that sort of thing of just like, there is a video of they did a live tour and then did a video of it, and it's amazing that they make traveling around Europe playing songs for their fans look absolutely like a ball ache. There's just and you just go, but it's one of those ones as well. Because I was quite a morose teenager, and loads of people are like, "Oh, Radiohead are really depressing," and you're like, "Yeah, but I think I think making music for depressed teenagers to feel less depressed about is a good, a solidly good thing."
Yeah,
and there was a time when Nick Hornby was writing, the guy who wrote Fever Pitch and High Fidelity, was probably at the height of his sort of fame and success at that point. It was certainly like in the public consciousness most, wrote about Radiohead and Kid A, and was just saying like it's an album that you buy and have to convince yourself is good because you've spent all this money on it, and it's not worth doing that. And then there was like this sort of like very early proto-internet backlash of being like, "Shut up, no, it's actually good. I didn't have to learn it. It was all really good. Like you've not understand it. It's not for you." Which I find like that was one of the first. I mean, it was probably not the first internet backlash, but it was certainly the first one I was aware of just being like away from the gatekeepers of the enemy says it's good, the melody maker, which was, going out of business in 2000, or whatever the popular music press would have been at the time, saying it's good, it's not good. It's because it was very. Now I imagine that because like Pitchfork have got it and they're like, no, it's a 10. We always said this, and you're like, well, Pitchfork didn't exist in 2000. but would you have? Or is this like a going back thing of being like, yes, of course, when I was young, I thought, it's like when people say, oh, what was your first band that you went to see? And the temptation is to say something really cool and just be like, yeah, I saw these at the time. But like the first band I went to see was a Christian rap band because my mum paid for me to go. They were called the Worldwide Message Trust.
Interesting you mentioned about the kind of like the backlash that it had and stuff, because I think so. If we head back to that idea where I think from the background that I've looked into is that I think the album was kind of almost a kind of reaction to the success of OK Computer, and from what I've read, they pretty much the band pretty much knackered themselves promoting that album.
Yeah, it was like because that was their big breakthrough, if you will. It just never sat with anyone like in the same way that others did. Like the Bends was a popular album, but it didn't break them into the mainstream in the same way that the other ones did. Whereas OK Computer was huge, but yeah, then Kid A sort of just like came through and was like a reaction to that of just going, oh, we don't want to write pop singles for things. We don't want to have our music used in that way.
Yeah, there's a few interesting things that some of the band members have said in the lead up to Kid A as well, where I think Colin Greenwood said that we felt that we had to change everything. There were other guitar bands out there doing similar things. We had to move on. Ed O'Brien had said that he hoped Radiohead's fourth album would comprise snappy melodic guitar songs, but York then stated there was no chance the album sounded like that, and he said he had it with melody. Yep. He wanted rhythm. All melodies to me were pure embarrassment. So, and as I was doing this research as well, he said that he said he was troubled by acts he felt were copying Radiohead, and that his music become part of constant background noise he described as fridge buzz, and became hostile to the music media. So, which I think is quite an interesting thing, particularly when you start to think about Kid A as a whole. Because I had a choice listening to a few songs from earlier albums, just to get like a feel for how much of a departure this was. Yeah. And the impression that I'm getting is that Tom York got to a point where he's like, okay, I don't like how people are copying us, and we feel like we suddenly going to end up being sunk into this mirage of indie bands, which I think would be at least another 10 years before that kind of happened for the indie boom of the noughties.
Yes.
But I feel I do kind of like the idea that he pretty much said, okay, we need to make something that's kind of anti-Radiohead, just so that we can kind of like say something's Radiohead, and then if people come to us and say, oh, Radiohead are just like another, I don't know, grunge band like Reading Creep that was getting compared to Soundgarden and Nirvana, and Creed does actually sound quite grungy. So I've got a feeling that when they say things like that, say, well, no, if you listen to Kid A, we're nothing like that now.
Yeah, exactly. It's a thing because so much of grunge could didn't or couldn't evolve. You know, the bands stopped being existing, or the Seattle scene completely imploded, or they went right. Okay, because like I think Britpop was a reaction to grunge, which was a reaction to hair metal, which was a reaction to this sort of po-faced rock where they're like, oh, we're going to be all this and that. Grunge was quite po-faced, and Britpop was like, oh no, we're going to be quite fun. We don't like, you can do standing on stage being a rock star. You can have fun. You can be in the do cool music videos and run around. And I think Kid A was a reaction then to Britpop of just going, all right, but do we want to do that? Do you want to be on the front page of the Daily Star, hanging out with Danny Baker and, being part of the establishment of rock music? And do you want to turn up on BBC Breakfast or whatever it would have been at the time, the Big Breakfast rather, at the time, being like, yeah, we're jumping around, we're being all wacky. Johnny Vaughan's in our house. Or do you want to go into a music studio and make something weird? And I think that's what they wanted to do. But because it's a very interesting one, because they are serious musicians, Radiohead, in the way that a lot of Britpop ones don't seem to be as much, where they're like, okay, because Johnny Greenwood's gone off and done sort of like ambient film soundtracks and stuff like that. And they're like, yeah, we're going to play around with form. And, I think some of Britpop would have gone, yeah, if we're not playing our songs on stage in front of thousands of people, what's the point? That's what we got into it for. Whereas if you just went, here's a load of instruments in a basement would you want to do it? And they're like, nah. Whereas Radiohead would be like, oh yes, loads of instruments in a basement. If we don't have to go out and tour, if we don't have to, go onto into the music press and talk to people, or if we can just hide and make our little weird things and post them out through the letterbox, just be like, yeah, you come and collect it in a couple of years, and we don't really want to do the press or that sort of thing.
Yeah, and I kind of get that kind of like, these I try something new. I think previous episodes have mentioned that you can kind of understand if bands are doing certain things for a long time. You can kind of understand that they want to try something different, just not to.
Yeah, it's a fascinating thing with it's the difference between comedy and music, is that the bands generally, like, you can have a hit single that you're famous for and you can not want to play it, but that that's what people have come for. Whereas it's very rare that comedians get like a bit that you have to do, like where you're like, if you went to see Michael McIntyre, for instance, who's got some of the big bits of sort of like the comedy that was on DVD when everyone was watching DVDs. Like if he did the Mandraw bit, you'd be like, oh cool, he did the Mandraw bit. But if he didn't, you wouldn't be there going, oh, I can't believe he didn't do that. You'd be like, no, he did a show. He did an hour of stuff that we'd never heard before, and it was great. Whereas if Oasis reformed and just went, we're just doing new stuff, everyone would be furious. They'd be like, no, play the songs that I know. And there's loads of, I know so many people have gone to see people like Chesney Hawkes or, Vanilla Ice or whatever, where they know what they're about and they play their opening hit. They play the hit that they know. Like, apparently Chesney Hawkes will play I Am the One and Only 4 times in a set, because he knows he knows you came here to see this, and I can't legally not do this. Like, if you've booked Chesney Hawkes, you're going to get the one and only. I'll do it the way it's on the single. I'll do it a stripped down acoustic one. I'll play it again to close, and I'll do a medley. And you'll get that. Like, you're not going to go to Chesney Hawkes being like, oh, I'd love to see the early stuff off one of the albums. Like, I want to hear what's going on with you. What's your new stuff? Because it just doesn't work like that.
You just go to a Chesney Hawkes and just want to hear all the deep B-sides, or like all the second half of his albums. Yeah. Goes, bloody hell. I mean, you know how some people have like, okay, I'll go and see so-and-so, but I'll wait till they play that song, so that's when I'll go for a piss. Goes, bloody hell, I went for a pee 4 times at the Chesney Hawkes because he kept playing that song.
Yeah.
But I tell you what, toilets were quiet.
Yeah, but he's I find it a fascinating thing of just sort of like, there are some bands where they throw out almost all of their back catalogue for years. Creep was the Radiohead song that was in the public consciousness, less so in the UK, but certainly worldwide. Like, that was the only one that really broke in America. Creep.
It was, because the Social Network trailer had a cover, and I know that Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross did the soundtrack. I don't know whether they performed the cover as well, but there's a cover of Creep that they did, which weirdly sounds like it belonged on Kid A almost.
Yeah. Well, but for years they didn't play it live, and they just sort of refused to. And luckily they've got enough other songs that are great that they can do that, but they could just be like, yeah, we're not playing our hit, we're not playing the thing that you've potentially come to see, which is an artistic move that you that not many bands can take. You can't be like, yeah, we're not playing that. We'll play. Try and think of a band from that era that could literally say we're not playing art, like, I don't know, say like Ocean Colour Scene probably couldn't have ever done one without doing the Riverboat song or The Day We Caught the Train, because people would have been like, those are the two songs that I know. Like, an Ocean Colour Scene are one. They're another band that do have loads more songs that you know than you think you do, and have a very strong and virulent fan base who absolutely love them. So that maybe not the best example, but yeah, there would have been ones where, if you're a casual fan of the band and you're like, oh yeah, I know that song and that song, I'll go see them, and then they didn't play either of them, you'd be like, oh, that felt a little bit of a rip.
There's a few interesting things that I think that Tom York decided to do when he came to the lyrics and the writing of the actual song and stuff, where on Wikipedia it says that Kid A lyrics are less personal than other albums, and that he cut out words and phrases and assembled them at random, combining cliches and banal observations such as where'd you park the car with violent imagery, cut the kids in half. Interestingly, he cited David Byrne's approach on the 1980 Talking Heads album Remaining Light as an influence. When they made that record, they had no real songs, just wrote it all as they went along. Byrne turned up with pages and pages and just picked up stuff and threw bits in all the time. And that's exactly how I approached Kid A. So Radiohead used York's lyrics like pieces in a collage, creating an artwork out of little different things. The lyrics are not included in the liner notes, as Radiohead felt they could not be considered independently of the music, and York said he did not want listeners to focus on them. Which I read after my initial listen, because one of the first things that I noticed was that it seems like the lyrics aren't the main draw of the album. It's all the weird things they do with the music. And reading that, I was like, oh, okay, it's like they're putting lyrics in for lyrics' sake. Just whether it just, at least it just gives Tom York something to do when they're performing live.
I think they would have been like, that thing where you like leave a lyric as your like social media thing.
Yes.
That I mean, just like, this lyric means so much to me. It's like, or you're like, your moody poetry, and they were like, no, we don't want to do that. We don't want it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Then again, though, I am guilty of having almost 2 decades of putting song lyrics.
Oh yeah, aren't we all?
Yeah. I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure. Currently, I think my bio either on Instagram. I don't think it's on Twitter, but my bio on Instagram, I'm pretty sure, is Los Campesinos lyrics. So, and it's probably has been for
yeah. Cool.
Because you mentioned about the use of the internet and how Radiohead used the internet. Radiohead have experimented with internet promotion for OK Computer in 1997, but by 2000, online music promotion was not widespread. The labels had to still be reliant on MTV and radio. And now this is probably going to be the most 2000 thing I'll ever say on this podcast.
Yep.
Capitol launched an innovative marketing campaign broadcasting blips, short films set to Kid A's music, on music channels and distributing them online. The iBlip, a Java applet, could be embedded in fan sites and allowed users to pre-order and stream the album. It was used on over 1,000 sites, and the album was streamed more than 400,000 times. And the iBlip included artwork, photos, and links to order the album on the online retailer Amazon. And initially I was like, oh man, the 2000s, that's hilarious. Then suddenly thought about it, I'm like, hang on. When you think about it now, you can embed Spotify tracks onto pretty much any website, or links onto that. And I'm like, actually, as funny as it says, cause I think it's the term iBlip when it's nothing to do with Apple, but that is pretty much like about either at least 10 or 15 years ahead of its time. And I was reading, and when I gave it more thought, I'm like, that's actually quite interesting. I mean, if it was the album being streamed 400,000 times in 2000 on when people pretty much probably didn't have broadband. I mean, I didn't have broadband until like 2004, 2005. That's
yeah,
actually quite remarkable, I think.
yeah.
400,000 times for
And,
popular bands is probably not much, but for 2,000 on,
well, yeah, when it was penny a minute on AOL, like
yeah,
that's the or like some of the weird ones that occasionally you'll still come across people with like very old internet email addresses where people are like, yes, it's my name at tiscally.net, and you're like, how is that still
another
how does that
.com or
still
something.
exist? Yeah. They but Radiohead did a thing which was one of their albums, a later one. This would have been about 2008. So I can't remember exactly which one it was. And I'm sure that your listeners are screaming there going, it was this one, you idiot.
Is it
But
in Rainbows?
yes, where they
Yeah,
did it as a
pay you.
they pay as you go. They
Yeah.
just they weren't the first band to do it, but they were the first ones the first big band to do it. There was a band called the Crimea who'd done it, but they'd not had that much success from it. But they literally just said, right, it's on this website. You can pay what you want for it. You can pay as little as a penny. But loads of people were like, no, I've had a good thing from it, and it saves me footling around in the horrible torrents of the time. I mean, I haven't torrented anything in 5 years, 10 years, because I had something eat the inside of my computer once that I was just like, okay, it's not worth me doing. And I don't know if it's still a horrible hellscape of spamware and pop-up ads and all that sort of stuff. But they literally just like, half of you are going to torrent this anyway, so you might as well torrent it straight from us. And I think they made more money from that than they'd ever done from a studio album, and proved its effectiveness as a like nowadays. They were doing SoundCloud or Bandcamp years before. They were just sort of like, this is a legit way to get your if all you're going to do is buy the album on a CD, rip it onto your MP3 player, and put it on the shelf. You don't need to do that. Like, you can just rip the MP3 straight from us, and we'll give them that over to you, and we'll. But yeah, now they're just like they simultaneously some of the big things like where they were putting Game of Thrones out at 2 a.m. to stop people torrenting it, just going, right, you can watch it now, or we'll put it on at 9, which is, a sensible time to watch it, but you can watch it at 2 a.m. if you want to, like, so you're not scrabbling around on the internet trying to steal it from us to save yourself 15 hours. But yeah.
Yeah, I think I found out that an album I was waiting for it to come on Spotify, but I was in Japan at the time, and I woke up in the morning, and this album wasn't like on Spotify, even though it was like a Friday, and I was like, "What the hell's going on?" And then it was actually about 3 o'clock in the afternoon before it suddenly appeared, and I'm like, "Oh, okay," because that's when it's like midnight in like California or something. But
Yeah.
when you think of this album, which songs jump out at you? So, which songs do you want to highlight first?
So it starts in a really interesting way, which is everything in its right place, which is the just sort of like when you're talking about like the lyrical content of where they threw away pretty much all of the lyrics. It just literally starts going, everything in its right place, everything in its right place, in its right. But it doesn't even start with it's sort of probably 2 minutes in before there's an actual lyric. You just go like there's a big sort of audio soundscape type thing. I'm not a musician, so I find it quite difficult to talk about music, be like from a actual technical point of view. But yeah, it's this sort of like sweeping, almost cinematic stuff. There was which is one of the things that Radiohead are very good at, is, almost making like soundtracks for imaginary films. One of their tracks is called, I think it's either Kid A or the band, it's called Exit Music for a Film. And they were doing that before they were actual, Hollywood composers, where they were making movie soundtracks for films that didn't exist, and go, yeah, this is a film that I'd make in my head. Here's the music of this. So yeah, it starts with that, which is and it's really funny because I'm just looking at the lyrics and it says, yesterday I woke up sucking on a lemon, and 2000 for what, that 20 years I've been listening to that track. I had no ideas those were the lyrics, because it's sort of like, so Tom York's got a very distinctive voice where he can pick out certain words and then mumble or sort of like distort his voice in a natural way without running it through filters or things, where he can choose whether, because he's got very interesting vocal range, he can choose whether it's like really crisp or I'm just giving you the gist of it. So I didn't know it was yesterday I woke up sucking on a lemon. It was like, because it goes, yesterday I was, and then you go, oh, is that what you were trying to say all of these years? That's the, and it's entirely possible that what am I on looking at this? The Google lyrics are not even correct. Because you never know.
A couple of times that, because I'm looking on Genius, where a lot of the comments were like, "Oh, for years I've been singing this, and this," and like, so like the focus on that and stuff, and like, apparently, like the first 8 years ago, the first comment on, and never read internet comments, which is a rule I never follow. So Genius has the intro with Tom York singing the phrase "Kid A, Kid A, Kid A, Kid A," and then first person goes, and there's I think there must be people that agree with him, because it's got a plus 116 thumbs up on it. It goes, "Kid A should not be listed as a lyric. It is not part of the lead vocals. It's part of the non-transcribed vocal mess that runs through the entire song. It's a good note, though." Immediately following it, another vocal sounds like it's saying something like, "God sent a spark to me." And yeah, so immediately, like, there's a lot, what I found, there's a lot of people who have very strong opinions on Radiohead and not scared to post it on the internet.
There's an interesting thing of like bands. I mean, it's with a lot of these things where you're like, the fan base is quite and certainly was in the early thousands, where they were like, the band are brilliant but the fan base are awful, and Radiohead's was one of those where it was sort of like, yeah, like, we're all depressed teenagers, but you're definitely going out to be the most depressed, most teenager one of us, you know. We don't want to have fun, and like, sort of certainly a little bit later with whatever, the Amnesiac, which was the one after that, Radiohead album after that, which was quite anti-capitalist and like anti-war in Iraq, and there was lots of stuff where it was like, yeah, we hate the system and we want that, which is, you know, all legit, but it was quite po-faced and quite, yeah, you're the saddest boy, aren't you? You're the, like, this song's all about me, that sort of thing you got from a lot of Radiohead fans, and yeah, it's a very interesting one with that, where people come out and say like, yeah, it was a really weird one, because there's not there were sort of like virulent Radiohead fans who I think did no favour for the Radiohead fandom, if you know what I mean, where you sort of like, you're being angry on the internet and that's not helping anyone. But we all do stupid stuff when we're young, and if you're going to be, you know, posting, that's not the lyrics, this is the lyrics, this is, because Radiohead did refuse to put the lyrics in the track listings, and so you could make it about what you thought it was about, really. They weren't, so you can go, oh yeah, this is what that song is singing to me, and you're not wrong. Recently did a wine tasting thing for work, and the guy who was leading the wine tasting, and I promise this does relate somewhat, is he went, if you, basically, there's no wrong answers in a wine tasting. If you say, it smells to me of watermelon, and I can't smell that, that doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. If you say it smells of watermelon, and I think it tastes it would go well with grilled fish, and you're sitting there just going, for me, it tastes of raspberries, and I think it would go well with pudding. Neither of you are wrong, because you can't be wrong on these things. And I think Radiohead lyrics were that sort of thing where you're just like, I know you've written it down as yesterday I woke up soaking on a lemon, but I heard it as yesterday I woke up soaking wet, and which is what I always thought were the lyrics. Yesterday I woke up soaking wet, rather than soaking on a lemon, which doesn't even scan, so I think Google's wrong. And you're not wrong. Like, you can be like, oh yeah, that's what it meant to me, and that's what I thought they were going for. And yeah, you can take your own interpretation from it. I just find those sort of things very interesting. Once you put them out into the public, it's not what your song is. Like, it's not your song anymore, and you can have your take on it, but you can, once you've put out a piece of art, it's up to everyone's own interpretation, I guess.
I fully agree on, and that kind of goes back to the point you was on about with the Yes Sir I Can Boogie, in that when it suddenly gets invested by something else. So if we move on, any other songs you want to mention?
The National Anthem is the one on the is on there. I've wanted to do this for years. I think it's because it's mostly it's like a 7-minute song, and 5.5 minutes are like instrumental. And I really want to do it as a thing, which is basically just a sketch. You get loads of choirs and like the England football team, and it's basically, the sketch is, what if Radiohead's The National Anthem was the national anthem? And so just like people at the Olympics stood on the podium and just, now the national anthem of Great Britain. And there's like choirs of school children just going, everything's wrong. And then just having a crowd full of football stadium just trying to do the guitar solo. I think that'd be very funny.
The national anthem as well is that, I think it's one of those, if you've got Spotify running in the background or your PC and you're going onto a website, and then suddenly a website has that awful autoplay and it starts playing over the song. I genuinely thought that's what happened whilst listening to this. I had Spotify out, because there's a bit about 2.5-3 minutes in when suddenly all this kind of brass and these trumpets start coming in, and it's not in time with the actual bass line or the rhythm of the song.
No,
it's all erratic. And I was like, what? And I was there trying to figure out what the bloody hell's causing that, right? And I was trying to figure out what tab I had open, which was playing this like brass music. And then I thought, I can't hear this. Pause Spotify, and it was like, oh, okay.
Oh, that was it. Yeah.
Yes, that was it. But I think, and that's the kind of thing I can see that perhaps would have rubbed some people like the wrong way when listening to this, because it's very experimental. It's very kind of like, let's just try doing this and just throwing in.
And that was it. And I don't think there would have been, and you'll have people in the comments on this going, you idiot, of course. But I don't think like brass was a huge thing on a lot of records of that time. Certainly a lot of the time signatures and the sort of like, as you say, it's discordant. It doesn't fit with the melody, or it doesn't fit with the like, it feels like it's thrown in over the top. And I love that. I thought it was just so interesting to me when I was listening to it the first time, of just going, wow, I didn't know you were allowed to do that. I didn't know that you were allowed to write a song that's not 3 minutes long and about a breakup or falling in love the first time. You can write a 3-minute song called the National Anthem that's just, you can write a 7-minute song that doesn't start for 5.5 minutes with any lyrics. You can just have these sort of walls of noise and creating sort of soundscapes around it. I didn't know it was allowed. I thought it was great.
I mean, like, you got the rules of music and you've broken them. And the on the Wikipedia page for this song, for the Wikipedia page on this song, there's an interesting part of the critical reception where the paragraph for the negative stuff is longer than the positive. But it's the song received polarised reviews from music critics. In his review of the album for the New Yorker, Nick Hornby mentioned that the song has an unpleasant free jazz workout with a discordant horn section squalling over a studiedly crude bass line. Mark Beaumont, for the Melody Maker, wrote 10 years later that the freeform jazz horns of the National Anthem produced a Mingus in a tumble dryer racket. Lorraine Alley, writing for Newsweek, that's Newsweek reviewing Kid A. That's an interesting mix.
Yeah.
Lorraine Alley, writing for Newsweek, described the song as an annoying pile-up of squawking instruments, and Rob Sheffield of Rolling Stone said the horn section was cornier than the usual art rock cliche, trying way too hard for the too obvious gimmick. But then Adam Denner of Sputnik Music said by the end of the song you're in awe of such a jam session. The Irish Times said it distills Radiohead's worldview with the guitars and York's evocative voice, all intelligence, deep emotion. And Cam Lindsay of Exclaim said it's the album's standout track. So yeah, it's very, very polarising song for all over, and it's a interesting mix. And I think this as well, I was going to mention this earlier and I forgot to. This album kind of made me it kind of also explains or gives me a bigger understanding of one of my favourite albums, which is The Postal Service.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. So, for those that don't know, so Ben Gibbard of Death Cab for Cutie had a side project with the guy whose name I can't remember from Dental, and it's basically kind of like going from kind of like sad indie to kind of electronica. And Postal Service is a lot more melodic and restrained than some of this, but it did remind me of it. And I mean, there's only 3 years in between those albums actually, and it feels blows my mind actually, because Postal Service was 2003 and this was only 2000. But I can kind of see that was influenced by perhaps the direction that this went in terms of the stuff and that. So, and I think because there's a song called National Anthem on the Postal Service album as well. So.
Yeah, because it's one of those things that was tremendously influential of sort of like there were people not copying it but going, oh, I didn't know we were allowed to do that. And then it was also influential in there was a backlash to it where people were going, oh, Radiohead are trying to get rid of melody. We're going to try and write more melodies then, more catchier hooks. Like, we'll go in the opposite direction. If that's where they're going, we'll go the other way and try and get like catchy lyrics, fun things. So the Strokes, Is This It? Is 2001, so like a year after this, and it's all very quick. Hear a bunch of short songs with that have a hook and have a thing, and you wonder whether that's a reaction to going, okay, you're like, they're going weird in 7-minute songs and like no thing, so we're going to go short and 2-minute songs and like really solid bass lines and not going discordant, and sure, we'll run it through like filters and pedals and stuff, but you can definitely hear that as an electric guitar being played. Like, it's not going, what even is that instrument? What's that noise? So yeah, it's I'd be very interested to know sort of like the behind the scenes thing. Apparently they wanted Dr. Dre to Radiohead wanted Dr. Dre to work on Kid A as a producer. They only came out years later where they just like came out in an interview, but they wanted
that would be very interesting.
Yeah, because he's like,
it wouldn't be as erratic as it was. I mean, like what? Yeah. I mean, if you look at 2001, that's very polished. It's very tight.
What is the Dre album around that time? Is it? Yeah. And you go like, and he's always been like just such an amazing producer. When you listen to his beats and his stuff, and you just go, oh yeah, maybe like that could have worked. Like one of those ones where it's like the sort of alternate universe where that happens would be just really interested to see what that sprung off, whether it would have worked, whether it would have like been a horrible disaster. But yeah, I really want to know like how far they got down that line of like, did they just say, oh, we'd like Dr. Dre, or did they like send an email saying, we'd like to work with you, and him going, I don't know who you are, or like, did their record label approach, like did they ever even have a meeting? I would love to know like the deep sort of stuff of it.
I just got this image. I just actually got this image now of them going like Dr. Dre going, "Oh yeah, what kind of stuff are you working on? Well, this is stuff for Kid A," and he goes, and then Dr. Dre coming back, "I much prefer OK Computer. Send," and then and then just cutting them off.
Exactly. Do electioneering again. That's my favourite of OK Computer. Just yeah, I liked your early stuff. I liked Anyone Can Play Guitar off Pablo Honey. Do that. So yeah, I think that'd be just a fascinating thing of just.
Yeah, if that happened, 2001 would have been a very different album. Being conscious of the time, I think if is there one more song that you want to briefly talk about before we move?
Because I never really listened to it as an individual tracks. It's always been one of those ones that you stick on and you let it, all of it wash over you. In that, if it came out as one track, I don't think it would be a particularly bad thing. There's certain albums where you skip a track on, even though it's an album that you've heard, like OK Computer. I always skip Fitter Happier because which is the one that's sort of like weirdly is actually one of their ones that would fit on Kid A, and was them doing a little bit of Kid A before Kid A. So it's a sort of weird electronic thing, and it's in a robotic voice. It's the one that just goes fitter, happier, more productive, comfortable, not drinking too much. And it's sort of like this, but it's not a song that I can appreciate, but I don't enjoy in that context. Whereas Kid A, I always just sort of listened as a wash over you. Like I wouldn't be able to tell you, oh, that is the song that sounds like this is what Optimistic sounds like, and yelling out for that and go play that one at a Radiohead gig, whereas you just be like, oh yeah, no, all of that goes into like a flowing, certainly the second half all seems to be one long song that changes, like chops and changes. But if you just said that's one 15-20 minute song, I would go, yeah, that sounds about right. And it's got movements and changes rather than it being
Kid A was apparently a lot of people looking forward to it. It was like people pretty much waiting for the sequel to OK Computer. So there's a lot of hype around it.
And I think if they'd have done OK Computer 2, the OK Computer, it would have been very popular. But they just went, no, we don't want to do that. We don't want to make that album again, and so yeah, there was a big sort of, but it was hugely popular as a record. But I think that was like a lot of the sales were pre-orders that people were like, oh, there's a new Radiohead album, let's buy it before we hear it. And so like obviously it's since gone platinum multiple times, but like I don't know how much of that is the initial people who bought it and went, oh, this is what I was expecting.
Yeah, you're like going, what the bloody hell is this? But so I'm just reading the Wikipedia article for critical reception. After Kid A had been played for critics, The Guardian wrote of the muted electronic hums, pulses and tones, predicting that it would confuse listeners. Many critics bemoaned the lack of guitar, obscured vocals and unconventional song structures, and some called the album a commercial suicide note. Mojo wrote upon first listen, Kid A is just awful. Too often it sounds like fragments as they began the writing process. With a loop, a riff, and muffled line of text, having been set in concrete and had other, lesser ideas piled on top. And Guardian critic Adam Sweeting wrote that even listeners raised on krautrock or Ornette Coleman would find Kid A a mystifying experience, and that it pandered to the worst cliches about Radiohead's relentless miserablism.
Yeah, I mean that is sort of true, but it was also like they were they had a fan base and they were trying to get rid of half of them, and it's a very interesting thing of just going, right, we're trying to get rid of half of our fan base and we're trying to build half a new one. But I do think it's such a great album. Like like 1.5 stars from the Melody Maker, who you'd have thought would be into it.
I just reading through this, I gotta say I love this quote from the Melody Maker. So critic Mark Beaumont called it a tubby, ostentatious, that's how it's pronounced, self-congratulate. Sorry, I'm gonna say that again. I keep reading ahead and I'm laughing.
Yeah.
Melody Maker critic Mark Beaumont called it a tubby, ostentatious, self-congratulatory, look Mark, I can suck my own cock, whiny old rubbish, about 60 songs that were started and no one had a bloody clue how to finish.
Yeah. It's just a very funny thing to just be, but like I find that there was speaking of like criticism as an art form, this was there was a time when like the late 2000s, the late 90s, early 2000s, where you weren't trying to review an album to tell people whether they'd like it or not. You were trying to do it to get the perfect like slam on it, and that sort of snarkiness, undercut quite a lot of these things of just going like, do you hate it, or are you saying that you hate it so that you can, because it's so much easier to write negatively in a funny and amusing way than it is to write positively in a funny and amusing way. It's so easy to slag something off and knock out a load of content about it, rather than it is to praise something and go, this is great. Like if bad movie reviews tend to be like so much like, if you say this is a terrible movie and here's the reasons why, they tend to be so much easier to review and just go like, this is a broken thing, here's all the reasons why it doesn't work. Whereas if you go, here's the reasons why this does work, is much harder to do. And sometimes with the little things of the reviews of the time, and I don't know Mark Bowman, and I don't know whether he would have, whether he'd still say that, but were you trying to get the worst? Like, were you trying to review it the worst, so that when other people were talking, like, so that you get mentioned in other reviews of like this, if you know what I mean? Like, so you could be like, wow, these guys loved it, this guy really hated it. And whereas if you just in the middle somewhere just going, yeah, actually it's good, it's bad, it's got some bits, it's all right, it's a difficult thing to write between, if you know what I mean, where you can be like, oh yeah, whereas I've made a horrible review and that's spreading around because if you can get a really crisp line, which is, I mean, it's a very funny thing to call it. Honestly, if I was Radiohead, I would be putting that on the stickers, the review stickers, just being like, it's been like, yeah, 4 stars, Rolling Stone, 9 out of 10, Spin, 1 suck your own cock rubbish from the Melody Maker, and just have them all on there at the same time. But then that is a thing that I do on my own reviews. I think it's a funny thing to do, is to have 2 nice ones and then 1 horrible one, and also it is more accurate for the for people. You can't they can't complain if they come to see your show or listen to your album, and you've put 2 good reviews and a bad one on there. Like, you were forewarned.
Yeah, definitely. I keep telling people to commit opinion fraud and give this podcast good reviews, but I like to refer to it as I like to refer to it as opinion fraud. But there was good reviews as well. Pitchfork gave it 10 out of 10. Brent DiCrasino of Pitchfork called it bloody hell, I can't say these long words. Cacophonous. Whatever that word is, yet tranquil, experimental yet familiar, foreign yet womb-like, spacious yet visceral, textured yet vaporous, awaking yet dreamlike. And he concluded that Radiohead must be the greatest band alive, if not the best since you know who. And this piece was one of the first Kid A reviews posted online, shared widely by Radiohead fans, and it helped popularise Pitchfork and became notorious for its obtuse writing.
So, yeah, Pitchfork is I didn't realise that was the start of Pitchfork. It's very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I do quote the Pitchfork reviews if I can find them. They are very interesting and entertaining to read. But yeah, I say same as you. It's only just now reading that I didn't realise that Pitchfork,
yeah.
Pitchfork was around that time, or at least it was started out. So, but and on Metacritic, it has a score of 80 based on 24 reviews, indicating generally favourable reviews. It was named one of the best albums of 2000 by publications including the Los Angeles Times, Spin, Melody Maker, raised eyebrow from me, Mojo,
Yeah.
Enemy, Pitchfork, Q, The Times, Uncut, and The Wire. At the 2001 Grammy Awards, Kid A was nominated for Album of the Year and won for Best Alternative Album. And the only thing I can think of was that whether Melody Maker fired the person who gave the review and just said, "Oh no, we've always liked it."
Yeah, it's a weird one. They do that sometimes, where the albums of the year lists will sometimes have things on there where they're like, "You gave that a C minus in April. How has it been? How has it suddenly become an album of the year in the next 6 months?" And
Yeah.
there are the sort of going back and forth on these things. Like there's lots of that where I don't think Pitchfork do it, or they certainly or they might have done it and then like got caught doing it, which was an album comes out, you give it a 6 out of 10, and then it becomes a cultural hotspot and is widely agreed to be a brilliant album, and then you go in and change it and be like, no, we always said it was a 9 out of 10. And there are those sort of things where you're like, but there's ones of I remember reading in the Enemy years ago, their 500 greatest singles of all time or something like that was one of their things, and they had bad reviews from the Enemy at the time that they put into it, and I was like, that is, if not brave, at least honest. You can be like you can be like, hey, we didn't get this right, or we like, it's an opinion, there's no right or wrong answer, it's entirely subjective. If you think it's great, that's fine. If you didn't think it's great, and also like it's always just like one guy writing for a website or a magazine that has 20 staff, so you can write that sort of thing. You can go,
yeah, so like just like, unless he just goes, "Oh God, who gave Derek the review of that again? We all like this, he didn't."
yeah.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
have you ever seen Radiohead live?
I have indeed. I saw them at V Festival in about 2009-ish. I'm just having to place it because I would have started doing comedy then, I think. No, maybe it was before that then. It was around the time that I started doing comedy, so that would have been maybe 2007. And they were brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Just like, they're such good, accomplished musicians, and the crowd were really into it. And it was sort of like one of those ones where it was like hot summer day, sun has just set, then they're throwing up all of the the light show and the big screen, weird, like, because they've always been with their like their album art and their videos, like quite interesting artists as visuals as well, and just throw it all over there. And so that was like a really good experience of just seeing them. And like, I think they played Creep for the first time in like, played it live for the first time in like 10 years or something. But it's just a really cool experience. I'd love to see them live again. And when I was writing my book earlier last year in middle of lockdown, I was trying to find things that I could draw to late at night, and found a load of Radiohead like live sessions from the basement, where they would just get together and like do an album again, or run through like, here's all of these songs running into each other. And they're so good. They are they're all on YouTube, and you can just go in there and just like find them mucking about with Kid A 20 years on, playing it out of the basement of their studios. Really cool.
Oh, okay. Oh, cool. So that's the only time you've seen him live then? You ain't seen him live once?
Yeah, I've only seen them live once, because they I missed them on all of the big tours. I think because time and money, when you're like, oh no, and then they stopped playing like 4 dates in the UK, and it would have just been like one massive one. We'll play an arena and Germany, rather than we're going to play London, Manchester, Glasgow, Wolverhampton. One of the things that I because now bands either play 2 big places or they'll play everywhere. But growing up, I lived in Wolverhampton, which is was amazing for live music. It was just like, it was one of the places that if you were doing a date in the Midlands, you wouldn't do Birmingham, you'd do Wolverhampton. And Manic Street Preachers have said that they, apart from playing in Cardiff, their favourite place, because they're always hometown gigs for them, their favourite place to play is the Civic in Wolverhampton. And you're just like, wow, that's crazy. But I saw so many bands there growing up that I almost didn't realise that it was, such a good place for going and watching music. At the thing of not having to, you could go and you get on the bus and you could go watch it, and then you could get the bus home and grab chips and see, amazing bands, but without having to do, 2 days on, like, skip a day's of school afterwards because you got in at 4 a.m, having come back from, 4 hours down the road.
Yeah, I think can't remember the last time I saw a band in Wolverhampton. It's a while ago, but you've seen them live. So if people want to, they've listened to Kid A for the first time and then want to go and listen to any other albums in the Radiohead discography, where would you recommend they go next?
It's one of those ones that you would do as a like a decision tree. So if you go, I liked that, I'd like it more. I'd like more like that. Hail to the Thief is good, and the King of Limbs is also along that line. If you like, I'd like it more polished and more melodic. OK Computer and The Bends are brilliant albums like that. And then Moonshaped Pool is really good as well, which is their most recent, I think. But you can sort of go from there and just go, oh, I liked that. If you like the sort of ambient and discordant stuff, you can go, yes, I'll go for Amnesiac or something like that, which was the follow-up to it. But I think either way, listen to In Rainbows, because In Rainbows is great, which is their one from 2007. But that's a very interesting album for if you both like and don't like the weird discordant stuff. It's got some of the electronica stuff, but also a bit more back to here's a melody, here's some lyrics. So that you can actually understand and sing. And it's a song that had, it's an album that had singles off it, whereas Amnesiac and King of Hail to the Thief didn't so much, even though they did try and do singles. I remember them playing Pyramid Song on Top of the Pops when that was still a thing, and just the sort of slightly baffled faces of a load of teeny boppers who'd come to see S Club 7. What is this? Why are you playing a very sad song for us? But yeah, it's very good.
Okay. There's a lot of choice then for Radiohead. So
yes,
we're gearing. Yeah, so we're gearing up to the end of our conversation, Paul. So the big question is to choose a song for the Hall of Fame playlist on Spotify. For people who have not listened to the podcast before, this is, I'll ask Paul to choose one song from this album to be immortalised forever on the Spotify Hall of Fame, and I can't veto it. So, Paul, which song are you going to add to the playlist?
I mean, let's go for the discordant ones of the National Anthem, because I think that is the most Kid A of all of the songs on Kid A. It's the most. Also, it is just a great song, but like it's the one that sounds most like that album. So if you're going to get into it, you will get into it off that, and it's going to ruin some people's playlists. So yeah, get that skip button if you're not into it. Sorry. But I will go for the National Anthem, please.
Yep, the National Anthem becomes the next song. It becomes the 69th song on the.
Hooray!
Hey, 69.
I think that is like the exact opposite of what Radiohead would want. And so therefore is the funniest thing to do is to.
Yeah, so that's it. We're here at the end of the chat, and it's been great having chat with you about about Radiohead and their interesting nature and their kind of like and just just an really interesting band, and it was probably nice to actually sit down to listen to them. And
Yeah, especially if it's a band that you never, if you've never listened to them before, which you say you haven't, it's an interesting place to start, and hopefully you'll be like, oh, I like, because they're a very interesting band. Well, I don't think any Radiohead fan likes all of the songs. I don't think. So you can go through and just be like, I like that one, I like that one, I like that one. That's good. So hopefully you'll do a little more reading around the subjects and listening to some other tracks off some other albums, and find a bunch of songs that you like, and you won't be Alan Partridge shrugging at the sound of Radiohead from now on.
yes, indeed. So if people want to find you online, see what you do, look at your your books. Where can they find you?
My books are on savagecomic.com. I've just written a new one that came out just before Christmas last year, which was called But Doctor, I Am a Collection of Comic Strips by Paul Savage. It's a collection of comic strips by me, Paul Savage. It's on savagecomic.com. You can check out some there. I've got some animations that I've done of the comics that are on TikTok, and are going very poorly because I don't think I'm what TikTok want, and I don't know how to plug it. So yeah, I'm on Comedy Savage on Twitter. I'm Savage Comics _ on Instagram because I didn't get to Instagram quick enough. And you can find all of that on savagecomic.com. I've put all my website stuff on there, and hopefully I'll be back gigging properly as soon as this ruddy pandemic goes. So hopefully there'll be some sort of gigs knocking around next year, and hopefully up at the Fringe in 2022. So yeah, hopefully I'll be back around gigging in due course. But yeah, if you and this keeps every time I do a podcast, it reminds me I need to get my website redone. So eventually, at some point, I will get Paul Savage Comedy back up online and put some of my jokes on there and some videos and such. But yeah, you can find me on YouTube and stuff like that if you want to see me stand up. That'd be cool.
Cool. And yeah, and that's it. We're at the very end of everything now. And all I want to say is that, Paul, thank you ever so much for coming on and talking about Radiohead.
It has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much, mate.
You've been listening to Pick a Disc, and I've been your host, Matthew Latham. Our theme music is Pump by Kevin MacLeod of Incompetech.com. Pick a Disc is hosted by the We Made This podcast network, and you can find them on www.spreaker.com/user/WeMadeThis. You can find the Pick a Disc show site on www.spreaker.com/show/pickadisc. You can find us on all the usual social media type places like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter under Pick a Disc. You can also email us on pickadisc@gmail.com. Until next time, happy listening to all those discs that you are picking. Goodbye.
Hello everyone, this is Tony, Network Chief of We Made This. As you know, our podcast network brings together a brilliant assortment of talent who talk about all kinds of pop culture content, such as the episode you just listened to, or maybe you're just about to listen to. We're not going anywhere, but we'd love to keep the lights on for even longer if you're able to support our network on Patreon. For just £2 a month, you get your name in lights and the satisfaction of knowing you're helping us produce more great audio. And for £3 a month, you'll get your name in lights, but you'll also get access to an exclusive bi-monthly podcast from the We Made This talent pool on podcasting, pop culture, and, well, you tell us. We'll take your suggestions. For less than the price of a coffee per month, you can help keep We Made This going. Just head to patreon.com/We Made This. That's patreon.com/We Made This. And get the ball rolling. Now, back to your scheduled programming.